New Life in the UK Test Chapter 3. Test 10. Which Acts of Parliament, passed in 1832 and 1867, abolished rotten boroughs, gave more parliamentary seats to urban areas and greatly increased the right of people to vote? A. The Change Acts. B. The Election Acts. C. The Reform Acts. D. The Voting Acts. Correct answer: the Reform Acts. Explanation: the Reform Act of 1832 had greatly increased the number of people with the right to vote. The Act also abolished the old pocket and rotten boroughs, and more parliamentary seats were given to the towns and cities. Rudyard Kipling was awarded which major prize in 1907? A. The Man Booker Prize. B. The Nobel Prize in Literature. C. The Pulitzer Prize. D. The Somerset Maugham Award. Correct answer: the Nobel Prize in Literature. Explanation: Kipling was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1907. Is the statement below true or false? Charles II marched into England with a Scottish army to reclaim his throne. A. False. B. True. Correct answer: true. Explanation: he was crowned King of Scotland and led a Scottish army into England. Is the statement below true or false? The Education Act of 1944 is often called the Butler Act and introduced free secondary education in England and Wales. A. False. B. True. Correct answer: true. Explanation: in this role, he oversaw the introduction of the Education Act 1944, often called the Butler Act, which introduced free secondary education in England and Wales. Which of these statements is not true? A. During Queen Victoria's reign, the middle classes became increasingly significant. B. During Queen Victoria's reign, the size and influence of the British middle class shrank. Correct answer: during Queen Victoria's reign, the size and influence of the British middle class shrank. Explanation: in 1837, Queen Victoria became Queen of the UK at the age of 18. She reigned until 1901. Almost 64 years. At the date of writing, 2013, this is the longest reign of any British monarch. Her reign is known as the Victorian Age. It was a time when Britain increased in power and influence abroad. Within the UK, the middle classes became increasingly significant, and a number of reformers led moves to improve conditions of life for the poor. Which of these two countries did poet and author Rudyard Kipling spend time living in? A. Fiji. B. India. C. Japan. D. USA. Correct answer: India and USA. Explanation: Rudyard Kipling was born in India in 1865 and later lived in India, the UK and the USA. He wrote books and poems set in both India and the UK. What was inscribed on some Iron Age coins? A. Dates. B. Names of Iron Age kings. C. Names of Iron Age settlements. D. Value. Correct answer: names of Iron Age kings. Explanation: the people of the Iron Age had a sophisticated culture and economy. They made the first coins to be minted in Britain, some inscribed with the names of Iron Age kings. Is the statement below true or false? The Domesday Book no longer exists. It was destroyed at the end of the Norman Conquest. A. False. B. True. Correct answer: false. Explanation: the people who lived there, who owned the land and what animals they owned were also listed. This was called the Domesday Book. It still exists today and gives a picture of society in England just after the Norman Conquest. Where did Mary Stuart spend most of her childhood? A. England. B. France. C. Germany. D. Spain. Correct answer: France. Explanation: much of her childhood was spent in France. When she returned to Scotland, she was the centre of a power struggle between different groups. Which king annexed Wales to the Crown of England with the Statute of Rhuddlan? A. Charles I. B. Edward I. C. Harold D. Henry VIII. Correct answer, Edward I. Explanation: in 1284, King Edward I of England introduced the Statute of Rhuddlan, which annexed Wales to the Crown of England. Who was King of England at the time of the Norman invasion in 1066? A. Harold. B. Henry VIII. C. Herbert. D. Hubert. Correct answer, Harold. Explanation: in 1066, an invasion led by William, the Duke of Normandy, in what is now northern France, defeated Harold, the Saxon King of England, at the Battle of Hastings. Harold was killed in the battle. The English Parliament during the reign of Charles I contained many Puritans. What did the Puritans believe in? A. None of the above. B. Roman Catholic religious doctrine and worship. C. Simple and strict religious doctrine and worship. D. The power of the nobility to control Parliament. Correct answer, simple and strict religious doctrine and worship. Explanation: many in Parliament were Puritans, a group of Protestants who advocated strict and simple religious doctrine and worship. The first farmers probably came to Britain from where? A. Northwest Europe. B. North America. C. Norway. D. Southeast Europe. Correct answer, Southeast Europe. Explanation: the first farmers arrived in Britain 6,000 years ago. The ancestors of these first farmers probably came from Southeast Europe. During the early 1970s, Britain admitted 28,000 people of Indian origin who had been forced to leave where? A. China. B. South Africa. C. The West Indies. D. Uganda. Correct answer, Uganda. Explanation: even so, during the early 1970s, Britain admitted 28,000 people of Indian origin who had been forced to leave Uganda. William of Normandy invaded England in 1066. Where is Normandy? A. Denmark. B. Northern France. C. Norway. D. Southern Scotland. Correct answer, Northern France. Explanation: in 1066, an invasion led by William, the Duke of Normandy, in what is now northern France, defeated Harold, the Saxon King of England, at the Battle of Hastings. Is the statement below true or false? The Canterbury Tales was one of the first books to be printed by William Caxton. A. False. B. True. Correct answer, true. Explanation: this collection of poems is called the Canterbury Tales. It was one of the first books to be printed by William Caxton, the first person in England to print books using a printing press. After the Glorious Revolution, Parliament was still some way from being a democracy. Why? A. Only bishops were able to vote. B. Only men who owned property of a certain value could vote. C. Only women were allowed to vote. D. Parliament took control of who could be monarch. Correct answer, only men who owned property of a certain value could vote. Explanation: after William III, the ministers gradually became more important than the monarch, but this was not a democracy in the modern sense. The number of people who had the right to vote for members of Parliament was still very small. Only men who owned property of a certain value were able to vote. The Northern Ireland Assembly was elected in 1999, suspended in 2002 and reinstated in which year? A. 2003. B. 2005. C. 2007. D. 2010. Correct answer, 2007. Explanation: the Northern Ireland Assembly was elected in 1999 but suspended in 2002. It was not reinstated until 2007. Acts of Parliament in 1870 and 1882 awarded which right to women? A. The right to attend university. B. The right to bear arms. C. The right to keep their own earnings and property after marriage. D. The right to work. Correct answer: the right to keep their own earnings and property after marriage. Explanation: Act of Parliament in 1870 and 1882 gave wives the right to keep their own earnings and property. Which of the following is a line from one of Churchill's famous speeches? A. I have a dream. B. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. C. The lady's not for turning. D. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Correct answer, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. Explanation, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. Churchill's first speech to the House of Commons after he became Prime Minister, 1940. Which of these statements is correct? A. Colonists in North America were poorly educated and uninterested in politics. B. Colonists in North America were well educated and interested in ideas of liberty. Correct answer. Colonists in North America were well educated and interested in ideas of liberty. Explanation, by the 1760s, there were substantial British colonies in North America. The colonies were wealthy and largely in control of their own affairs. Many of the colonist families had originally gone to North America in order to have religious freedom. They were well educated and interested in ideas of liberty. Henry VIII had 6 wives. What was the name of his first wife? A. Anne Boleyn. B. Anne of Cleves. C. Catherine Howard. D. Catherine of Aragon. Correct answer, Catherine of Aragon. Explanation, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine was a Spanish princess. She and Henry had a number of children but only one, Mary, survived. When Catherine was too old to give him another child, Henry decided to divorce her, hoping that another wife would give him a son to be his heir. Which Scottish poet wrote the Bruce about the Battle of Bannockburn? A. Geoffrey Chaucer. B. John Barber. C. John Milton. D. Robert Burns. Correct answer, John Barber. Explanation, in Scotland, many people continue to speak Gaelic and the Scots language also developed. A number of poets began to write in the Scots language. One example is John Barber, who wrote the Bruce about the Battle of Bannockburn during the 16th century, which 2 factors predominantly led to a bloody rebellion by the Irish chieftains. A. Extreme poverty and famine. B. High taxes on landowners. C. The imposing of English laws on land inheritance. D. The imposing of Protestantism. Correct answer, the imposing of English laws on land inheritance and the imposing of Protestantism. Explanation, in Ireland, however, attempts by the English to impose Protestantism, alongside efforts to introduce the English system of laws about the inheritance of land, led to rebellion from the Irish chieftains, and much brutal fighting followed.